Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Stories about debt collectors never get boring, so we'll start our video with just such a story. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Debt collectors want to see my father-in-law. Well, here you go. For a small bit of context, my father-in-law died about 2 years ago. He was living with us at the time due to health issues. About 6 months after his death, we started getting letters from debt collectors asking for stupid amounts of money. We did as asked and provided a copy of his death certificate, and were told it was sorted. We did as asked and provided a copy of his death certificate, and were told it was sorted. He didn't have much money and covered his funeral. Father-in-law wanted to be cremated, so we did as asked and had him stashed in a cupboard over the stairs. Wife has put his ashes under a tree, but saved some for if we ever move. A few weeks ago, we have several suited men turn up at our house. I go to the back door and walk to the front of the house. It's a small farm. I ask the men what they were doing on my property. They say they're here to collect on an outstanding debt. I ask to see their paperwork. Only debt we have is a mortgage, and we pay that on time without fail. As I'm looking over the paperwork, they're looking over at my car, work equipment, etc., looking like they've hit a jackpot. I noticed the name was father-in-law and explained to them he'd been dead for about 2 years. They demand to see him as they have no record of this, and they would take items to cover his debts. I pull out my phone and text my wife to call police because of trespassers. I ask her to put her dad's ashes on the front porch. I tell the debt collectors I've contacted her father and he'll be with us shortly. And until he's here, they are to wait off my property as I am the homeowner. I had to show them my ID to prove I wasn't the man they were looking for. Once the police turned up, they all drove back onto my property and I fetched the box of ashes. The debt collectors asked again if they could speak to father-in-law, so I then hand them the bag of ashes, which had a label that reads, "The remains of father-in-law," and the date. I looked the main debt collector in the face and said, "I told you he was dead several times, and you still asked to see him. Hope you guys have a good chat and are able to sort out this mess. Oh, and while you're speaking to him, can you ask him where he left my spare workshop key?" I turned to the police and explained how I've also asked them to get off my property several times and they refused because they needed to see father-in-law. They hand back the ashes and are getting ready to leave. I look at the police officer and he burst out laughing, and the officer asks if they'll be coming back or are they satisfied with this evidence. They claim to be happy with it. I've now added a lock to my main gate and an intercom. This morning I get a buzz just as I'm getting set up for the morning's work. Same debt collection company wanting again to see father-in-law. I grab the box of ashes and copies of the death certificate and head down to the main gate. 2 suited gentlemen and a very large van blocking my gate. I've driven down in my van and I get out, box and papers in hand. I again explain that he's dead. I show his death certificate and they again ask to speak to him. So I hand over the box and ask for their head office phone number. I stand in front of them, calling their boss, and explain that I've shown them the death certificate and his ashes. How do they expect him to pay his debts now that he's dead? They've assured me that they will not be returning. And our second story. A guy in a bad mood walks into a fast food joint and a table full of Karens. Cast. A very irritated guy in a horrible mood. Me. A store full of rude minimum wage workers. A table full of Karens. A few months ago, I was looking for a job. I spent most of my day walking downtown in interviews. At this point, I'm in a horrible mood. The only interviews that showed any interest were the ones that looked shifty AF. Most of the day is gone. The whole thing was just a farce, and I'm starving. It was one of those days that nothing goes right. After I was done, I chose to grab a bite. I chose a big local chain of fast food as they make decent food with quite a low price. As I enter, the first thing I notice is that it's kind of full, but the register was empty. I sighed as that usually means they have a lot of orders in the back and my food would be kinda late. I walked there and the employees, teenagers, probably part-timers or their first job, were giggling on the phone. One of them glances at me and says, "One moment." All right, I have no problem with that, and I wait, and wait, and wait. At some point, I look at the clock behind them. I was waiting awkwardly in front of 2 giggling teenagers for 4 minutes. I decided not to make a big deal out of it. I politely and discreetly clear my throat. The same teen rolls her eyes at me evidently very annoyed that I interrupted her again. The irritation of the day starts creeping out, but as I've worked retail most of my life, I hold it in. "What do you want to order?" she asks in a very rude manner. At this point, I'm quite sure I have a vein popping out, anime style. I swallow my temper. I have to point out I'm generally very polite in my social interactions, especially towards employees, having worked retail most of my life, and order my food. 2 small burgers and a cola, totaling something like €5.50. She rolls her eyes again. "Wow, spending the big bucks, aren't we?" in the most condescending, annoyingly bratty voice you can imagine. At this point, I just shrug my shoulders, my upbringing preventing me from making remarks my brain was screaming at me. I move to a corner on one of those tall bar tables on the side to wait for my order, and I take out my small notebook to write some notes on the last interview. I keep notes on the owner's attitudes and other small details I noticed during interviews. As I mind my business, a wild Karen encroaches on my personal space. "Excuse me, are you listening to me? I'm speaking to you." I turn around and I'm like, "What? Are you going to take our order now, or are you going to keep pretending to work?" I blinked. Then it hit me. I was wearing similar attire to the employees, a red polo and dark blue jeans. Of course, one could mention the fact that my red shirt was a different shade than the store uniform, that mine lacked the store logo and the name tag, not to mention a big leather bag hanging from my side. My years of experience taught me that Karen cells cannot coexist with brain cells. I tried to tell her I don't work here and that she must go to the register. Something to point out here, the way ordering works in big franchises here is you go to the register, make your order, you pay, and a server brings it to you. Very rarely would a server go to your table, usually if you take a while to order. After a while of demanding I take her order, I said, "Screw this," and I complied. I took her order. "All right, ma'am, where's your table?" She points at the 5 Karen table, and I nod. "I'll be right there." "Effing kids, all you know is how to avoid working. You should get fired, you lazy thing," she says as she leaves. I'm 30, no longer a kid, but I do look very young, 24 to 26 with a beard and around 20 shaved, which I was at the time. I wouldn't have it. I was hungry, in a horrible mood, and years of self-discipline were crumbling as I was hungry for blood. I went to the nightmare table that consisted of not 1, not 2, but 6 whole Karens. I put my biggest, fakest of smiles, and then I took the order. I even suggested a few non-existent dishes while ghostwriting on my notebook. I then pointed out that it was a big order and it'd take a while. I then left the nightmare on Karen table and went back to a corner and waited for my food in a far better mood. While waiting, a server went to their table and asked if they had ordered. "Yes, we have." "Are all the staff here as lazy as you?" At this point, I started grinning. She had a chance to fully undo my master plan, and she failed to grasp it. I waited for 5 more minutes for my order. I take and leave a happy man. I can only imagine the Karens trying to reorder the non-existent dishes I recommended after 20 to 30 minutes of not getting their order, only to be constantly told they don't exist, as well as the despairing faces of the staff trying to reason with the Karens. The Karens would wait quite a bit to eat if they managed to eat at all, while also giving hell to the employees. Essentially, I played an angry mob of Karens into fighting against some very rude employees while I made a gateway with my prized booty of calories, fat, and ice-cold vengeance. Granted, after calming down a bit, I did feel kind of bad for feeding a couple of inexperienced part-timers to the Karen sharks, but I was caught up in the moment. And our last story. Manager says no, and friend gets her fired. I was told this story by a friend. All right, so my friend, let's call him Jay, is a senior in high school working at a photography studio. Jay is often scheduled 13-hour shifts without a food break at this job, which he doesn't mind because it's good money and he's a hard worker. This becomes important later on. Jay came home from work on a Wednesday and was told by his mom that his grandmother is on her last legs and that they're going to see her for what will probably be the last time. So 3 days away. Unfortunately, Jay's work schedule was already posted and he was scheduled to work all day that Saturday. So Jay did what any good employee does. He messaged his manager explaining the situation and says he needs someone to cover his shift that Saturday as he will not be coming in. Manager gave him a list of people who weren't working that day for him to text and ask if they can pick up the shift. Jay sends messages out to all of them and is told by every single employee off that day that they are busy Saturday and cannot work. So Jay reaches back out to his manager to let him know he can't get a cover. Jay is then told by his manager that if he does not come in that day, he'll be fired. When he states that it will likely be the last time he ever sees his grandma alive, she says that she does not care and that he better come into work that Saturday. This is where the revenge begins. Jay didn't take so well to being told his manager didn't give two craps about his grandma dying, so he decided to pay a little phone call to HR. Remember those 13-hour shifts without breaks Jay works? Well, Jay is 17, and in his state, people under 18 cannot work more than 9 consecutive hours, especially without a break. Jay explains all this to HR on top of the situation concerning his grandma. Jay also puts in his 2 weeks on top of this. HR tells him they'll follow up with him soon and something will be done about all of this. That Friday, Jay came into work and his manager was gone, replaced by a new manager from another store. Jay also had been asked by the new manager if he would consider staying, and he agreed to it. So now Jay is still employed and much happier, and his manager is without a job. After he finished texting me all this, he added, "Don't F with me, and I won't F with you." Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.